A lot to talk about, but first I do want to start with Palantir. Company's been on a roll in terms of some of the contracts it's gotten in recent months, and particularly on the defense side. I think there was a Space Force contract just last week, but it's also been teaming up with increasingly and working with other agencies in the federal government as well, including the Department of Health and Human Services. I realize you're not necessarily involved in the day-to-day, but you're a co-founder, you're an investor, you're an advisor. Tell us about how it is working with the health departments right now where coronavirus is concerned.
Sure. Well, Palantir really has amazing business momentum. I mean, in 2019, it grew over 30%. This year, so far, since the beginning of this crisis, it's working with over 34 countries, over 115 major agencies around the world. And, what it's doing for the Health and Human Services group that was announced in UK and the US and other places, very similar to what it's doing in general to help leaders with the virus, which is it's helping to create a common operating picture. It's bringing together hundreds of data sources, and it's really putting things in one central place where leaders can help make critical decisions.
How does this work in terms of the collection of that data, how it's being used, and then I think perhaps most importantly, how it's actually influencing the government's decisions right now on reopening?
Yeah, so Palantir itself, of course, doesn't have access to the data. Palantir is a core technology infrastructure, and the government decides what data it's going to access, where it's going to get it from, depending on the country. Of course, there's different rules. But what's really similar is in order to make the decisions right now, in order to know where the PPEs need to go, in order to know when and where you're going to reopen, you want all the analytical models, all the pieces of information all in one place where everyone can have a single model of the world. Then you can build, model, discuss, using that single model. And it's actually very hard to do. If you were to do it with traditional technology, it might take you 6 months, 12 months of IT services to hook up all these things, to put them in one place. Palantir is really designed to thrive in a crisis because it's able to do this, right away. Within a couple of days, you have this giant thing stood up with all these things hooked up.
I really want to hear your perspective on opening up the economy again. And I know it probably differs by various states, by various localities, but what are the either testing or contact tracing capabilities that you think should be in place before the businesses that you invest in and their customers should feel comfortable opening up and welcoming people back?
Sure. Well, this has obviously become a really emotional and political issue, and I have smart friends who are on different sides of what we should be doing here. I think contact tracing is extremely promising. The leading safety network in the country, Citizen, is an app that has millions of people already on it, and I know they've been coordinating closely with Google and Apple and a lot of governors and are looking to do some big launches next week. And I'm involved and really excited about that. I think we're going to get some real serious contact tracing out. The key thing is to be able to work together philanthropically there, to have a platform where they can all talk to each other. It doesn't help us to have 10 different contact tracers, but I think if we can get a coherent single platform where they're all talking to each other, I think we should start getting young people out back in the workforce in the coming weeks. My personal bias is that young people who are less vulnerable, who are not living with vulnerable people, should be working in the next few weeks, but I know there's people who disagree, so that's a tough issue.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, you mentioned Citizen, which I know you're invested in. There's also Palantir. There's some of the other tech companies and Silicon Valley stalwarts that are looking at all of this and developing capabilities right now as well. It seems like it's a really fine line or a balance, and I'm curious what the conversations are at some of these companies around that balance between health and safety protections and being able to help enable the economy getting up and running again versus the surveillance piece of this puzzle and what that could mean in terms of civil liberties, privacy, data protections, even constitutionality.
Yeah, well, I know at companies like Citizen, the idea is that people only opt in and then the data is completely deleted after 30 days. I think that's generally the right strategy, is people should control their own data, should be able to decide how it's used. And you have to be really careful with that. So I think all of these companies that work with data, the whole framework is that they are privacy engines, and they have to be very, very clear about who gets to see the data, what's done with it, and make sure that's being controlled by the people making the laws, and make sure those people are being watched as well, frankly.
And
yeah, I know you've been pretty critical. Go ahead.
Joe, I'm curious what you're doing as an investor during this period. I have heard some investors tell me during difficult periods like this, the volume of deals that they're looking to do actually goes up. Maybe they're smaller deals. They feel that discipline-wise, during good times, you should do fewer. during bad times, you should actually do more. What's your take?
You know, I think there are some really great companies that are selling way too cheaply right now. We don't usually play too much in the secondary markets. I'm the chairman of an exchange called Zimbato, and it's interesting. Airbnb, for example, I think it was trading at 165 on that per share before this. It's now trading in the 70s. And, you know, there's a big question of, you know, have some of these big names sold off too much? On our side, we're mostly doubling down on our favorite companies we know well. You know, it's really hard to make a decision with a company you don't know well because we like to get to know people in our space. We're betting on the team. So for us, it's mostly about companies we know well and, you know, doubling down on the best things in our portfolio. In a lot of cases, you see companies reopening rounds from a year and a half ago, which allows them to get enough runway to put off the next round conversation for another year because, you know, Series Bs and Cs are not looking very good in this environment if you're on the entrepreneur side.